Hey everyone! Before we get into this episode, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something about the language being used. Throughout this conversation, you'll hear a lot of binary gendered terms like girls and women and men when referring to photographers and models. While my co hosts and I speak from our own experiences as cisgender female models, I want to recognize that not everyone in this industry identifies that way. Non binary and male models absolutely exist and are an important part of this space. Additionally, while not all photographers who hire models for nude shoots fit into the category that is being portrayed in this episode, many tend to be heterosexual men hiring femme presenting models. That dynamic naturally influences some of the topics we discuss, but the insights in this episode may apply to a wide range of creative collaborations. For the sake of continuity and ease of conversation, the language in this episode may lean toward the binary, but modeling is for everyone. We appreciate you listening with that in mind. Now, let's jump in. Okay. I need to do another disclaimer for this entire episode, which, by the way, is chopped up to 2 parts because we talked for such a long time about everything, and everything was super interesting and fascinating. The stigma of eroticism is going to be completely exposed in the photographer side and the model side. And this is a side that exposes the elements of sex work and how it plays into the model photography world as well, where many models and photographers out there do not want to address this. It is definitely a factor. So this podcast in general isn't only for like artistic models and photographers. We're talking about the whole scope of things. And my co-host for this podcast is a super open-minded, super eloquent, super fascinating person. And so I really think that you're going to find her perspective kind of balances the stigma of, what is sexuality, what is model photography, what drives us, what is artistic and creative, and what is pandering to giving somebody pleasure. So, yeah, this is going to be kind of a wild ride. And there were definitely parts where you can hear I was like a little bit flabbergasted by my co host's elaborate depictions, which will put your mind on a roller coaster journey, I promise you. It's wild, This is my disclaimer, like this episode is not going to be what you think it's going to be. So, all right, let's go for real now. Welcome to Sunrise Life, the podcast where we have deep conversations with fellow freelance models. And today I'm really excited to be having a deep dive with my friend Nadia, aka Vika Ruslanova. Say hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for making time for me. I know that you have got a lot going on, and I'm just so happy that we were able to connect again.
Absolutely. It's nice to hear from you, and happy to always talk to you. I find you very intellectual in the way you talk about this industry, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Well, today's topic is I've actually asked a bunch of models to do this one with me, and I haven't had any bites until you said yes. So thank you for agreeing to do apparently a taboo topic, which I don't think it's taboo, but
I'll take one for the team. It's okay.
So, by the way, this topic has been requested by at least 3 different photographers who don't know each other over email. And what we're going to be talking about today is the different types of photographers who photograph models. And certain photographers that emailed and requested me also wanted me to go down the rabbit hole on the GWC category, what it means, and all of that too. So we're going to get into all of this.
Let's start digging.
Okay. So there's a spectrum of photographers who work with models, and it ranges. Right, Nadia?
Mm-hmm. Very, very much.
And on one side of the spectrum, you got your professional photographers, or serious artists, working photographers, people who are making money and like, they've got a brand or whatever. On the opposite side of the spectrum, there are the hobbyists.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say this big division is based on what is your intention for the content? Is it for marketing, for a product, or for an artistic goal? Or is it for a personal fulfillment? And what that personal fulfillment can be is super, super broad. But are you trying to make money off of this on the back end, or are you doing this for yourself? I think that is like the first fork in this very, very, very long road.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I would just kind of like to set a disclaimer that anybody listening, like if you're a photographer and you're like, oh, where do I land in the spectrum? We're not here laying judgment on anybody for where you lie in the spectrum. We're not saying that either side of the spectrum is like good or bad, because there's definitely like professional photographers that are creepy predators, and there's definitely hobbyists that are nice, and I would work with them every day of the year.
Of course. And I think it's also important to realize that like people change and they shift, right? Somebody can want to do something for personal pleasure, then they might want to monetize it, then they might get burnt out and want to do it for themselves again. So, like, it's all fluid. It's fine to change. It's fine to have different purposes for different projects based on different needs. I just think it's important to understand what the various needs are and like how they get presented and handled.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that if you're true to yourself and you're shooting your photography for like the purpose that like, works for you, then that's good. However, I mean, I've worked with some photographers that you can tell that they're shooting for the joy of creativity, but they're like, they've got a main job, but they want photography to start making them money. But like, are you doing it for the money or are you doing it for the art? It's like I guess with modeling, it's the same thing. It's like we're doing this for the money or the art or both at the same time, right? I guess this is like a common conundrum.
I mean, we live in a capitalistic society, so pretty much most of what humans have to do is for money, which is so depressing. And that's just the reality of it. And obviously, it's easy to say, well, I have this amazing hobby and my friends tell me that I'm great. So I'm going to try to make a dollar off of it.
Right.
The world's changing. What people are willing to pay for is changing. The platforms in which to present those goods and services is changing. And the people are still staying the same,
Mhm.
right? As models, we get to see this change more because we are the providers of, the content ourselves. Like we are the people that either hold the bar of soap so you can sell it, or we are selling our image, our companionship, the process of photographing us, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's easy for the photographers, especially people who aren't like in the marketing side of things, to get a little bit lost as the world changes around them.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, like it's hard to just say, oh, well, I'm just going to sell photos on the internet now and recoup my expenses of the model. You can try,
Yeah.
but it's just a different landscape than it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
people need to understand it's not about them. It's just that the world wants different things now.
Yes. And I definitely do want to provide a section later on in this podcast about how photographers can make money with their photography. But before we get into that, I do want to dive into some fun photographer archetypes. But before we get into the archetypes, though, I think we need to address what each of our definitions of GWC is. For the listener who doesn't know what GWC means, can you define it in your own words?
So the textbook definition of GWC is guy with camera. And I think the using the word guy implies an element of casualness and not necessarily professionalism. It's not, professional with camera. And to me, it gives an undertone of somebody who is looking to create photos or videos for a more personal consumption or for a personal project that could lead to income, but fundamentally they're not like sponsored by a brand to shoot, or, they're not going for like a gallery showing or something like that. So it's people who seek this type of collaboration from a more personal desire.
I love your definition of that, and, I love that you implied that guy does kind of connote that it's a casual thing, 'cause I do get that, and I also a lot of people that use the term GWC are using it with, like, a derogatory meaning. It's like hobbyist doesn't, you know, hobbyist doesn't have the gendered descriptor, right? Hobbyist
I was like just about to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hobbyist could be anybody, but guy with camera typically refers to, like, heterosexual male.
And it kind of steers the thought into, well, why is a man doing this? What is the man's interest? Oh, we're going to make an assumption that the model is female. Okay, now we're running with all the sexual, all these sexual assumptions over the
Mhm.
dynamic. And sex is controversial, sexual expression is controversial, sexual desires are controversial. And I think with that, it puts kind of a veil on GWC that is not very easily definable.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And, a lot of people assume that when you say GWC, that you are implying that the person is creepy and that you shouldn't work with them, which I fully disagree with because if freelance modeling, GWCs make the world go round, right?
Absolutely. And I think this is something where, as a model, you need to have like professional empathy for people. If there is someone who is working with you and they're being respectful and they're treating you with dignity, and yeah, they're just a guy holding a camera taking photos of you, but they are doing their best. They're treating you like an equal collaborator and they're paying you fairly. Like, how dare you talk shit about them?
Yeah.
I think that's terrible on the industry. And I think it's very unwise for women to say that because they just perpetuate these tropes that are harmful. And it just fosters a lot of anger and resentment on both sides. I think people have an inflated ego that like, oh, so I'm so much only, the best of the best are going to work with me. Like, no, girl, you know, get your employment from people who are just regular people who are willing to give you a good job and don't inflate your head that they're beneath you in any way. You need them just as much as they need you. And if they're treating you appropriately, like, don't pass judgment. That's just wrong.
Yeah. And for people listening, if you are a hobbyist photographer and you don't want to be referred to as a GWC because you feel that it's negative, we hear you. You know what? We don't have to call you that. Like hobbyist, creative is cool, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for people to define their own labels. And if somebody defines themselves as a GWC, like they have to be aware that there's a stigma that comes to that name.
Yeah.
And like they have the power to change how people have their first impression of them. They can say, oh, I'm a hobbyist. I'm looking for blank. Great. I have a different assumption of what you're going to want. So
Yeah.
just power in words. And people really need to understand how they present themselves.
Yeah. Side note, when I get an email from somebody that says, "Hey, I'm not really professional, but I really like your photos and I would like to create something together. I'm just a guy with a camera trying to make something cool." I love that. That just screams that the person is being genuine with me and they're being honest. And I just know that it's going to be a good shoot, you know?
And it's refreshing. It is so refreshing to like find people that still have like the spark of creativity and they really do want to do, collaboration for the art of it and for the self-expression and the process of creating art, the technical skills, the physical setup, the interaction with the model, provoking an experience, collaborating on poses. Like that's the beauty of it. And I think people shouldn't be afraid to want to pursue that. That's really going to keep, I think, the origin of modeling and photographing alive by not having everything be about other needs, you know?
Yeah, totally. And with all that being said, I think it's probably a good time to get into the actual categories.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Okay. So, full disclosure, I had like messaged a handful of my other modeling friends to help me compile this list. And, I edited it a little bit to like kind of be a cohesive list of like categories of types of photographers that work with models that, kind of makes sense. So, how about we kind of just go down this list that we've made and talk about like our experiences with these types of photographers and like maybe what percentage of photographers that we've worked with over our careers that fit into these categories and if by the way if you remember any kind of funny or interesting stories as we're going down this list like feel free to share.
The attic of my dusty brain. See if I can pull some good stories up. Okay.
All right. Cool. So this first like genre are the social media obsessed photographers. So people who their photography revolves around like Instagram, Facebook, like other social media platforms, TikTok, whatever.
Okay. Well, when I look at people in all these different categories, the first thing I like to ask myself is why? Why is this person doing it? Right. In my experience, I feel like a lot of people have wanted to find some level of validation of themselves through their photography and to display it.
Hmm.
I think people see it as a reflection of their self identity and of their capabilities. And people obviously, enjoy sharing photos so they have a community where they can discuss things, they can get critique. It's been a long time since I've seen a really well written critique of a photo on an Instagram comment. It's usually pretty not very thought out
Yeah.
phrases that people say, but I understand the community building of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but I also see that some people can get lost in wanting to find clout for themselves through these social media profiles.
Yes.
And that goes back to like, why? Like, why do you need clout?
Yeah.
So these things kind of have to be like analyzed, like, one by one, and to just see like, why is this person doing it? Honestly, they could just be bored. I get it too, right? People just want to like take pictures and this is like the thing that they do.
Yes.
So again, the intent of this is important.
Yeah, like social media is definitely like really where we're all living socially right now. It's kind of hard to be like pulling our heads out of this like social media machine, but I do feel like a lot of people's photography over the last 10 years has been really geared towards like Instagram specifically. Like I remember like 8 years ago, I was working with this photographer, and this is back when implied nudes were totally allowed and like nobody would get in trouble for them back then, right?
Mhm.
And he wanted me to make poses that would fit nicely into a square so that it would look good on his Instagram feed.
Hmm.
And so, like, his Instagram feed was all implied nudes in, like, kind of crunched up or, like, square type positions, so
Yeah. And actually, kind of what you said there gave me a thought, about the different changing terms of service on these platforms. I think it's important to consider that as more people move to Instagram, their ability to express their creative selves is now hindered because of these terms of service that are applied because laws and political opinions, and that is a whole separate topic to go into.
Mm.
And
Oh, yeah.
it it's kind of like a neutering of self-expression just because somebody might want to take a sensual photo of a woman. There's less and less space for it on the internet now to be shared. And so people that might want to be like, look, like I enjoy creating sensual art with a model. might not now feel like they really have a place for them that's safe or they're not going to get banned and flagged, etc. Maybe you know where these other places are where people can go and, share photos that are not necessarily the PG-13 that Instagram wants things to be.
Yeah.
But I think it's really a shame that it just neuters people's ability to
Yeah. 'Cause
express their sexuality.
right. I mean, there's sorry, not TikTok. There's Twitter or X or whatever people are calling it now. You can definitely post nudes on there, but is there a good art community on Twitter for like artistic nudes? Like I haven't found it.
And the presentation is different, right? You don't just go on a profile and see like a whole display of photos and you can make like a quick judgment on, what the brand is, what they're trying to say, like what the message is. You're just kind of lost in the posts. I see some people using like Facebook groups specifically, to upload individual groups. But again, that's limitations on what you can post. Back in the day, there was DeviantArt. I don't know how active that still is. There was a website called not One Model Place. What was it? Models, not models, Model Central. Maybe it was Model
Model
Central.
Society?
Model Society. There you go. Yeah, that was like a thing for a while. I don't even know if that's still alive.
Dude, P.S. Model Society is a hella still a thing, and they actually they're my only sponsor on this podcast, by the way.
Well, there you go. There's one good thing left in the world.
No, yeah. No, Model Society is great, and, for those listening, I do recommend if you're a photographer or a model or a fan of photography and modeling, there's a place for you on Model Society.
How open are they with more explicit and erotic art?
They will allow erotic themes, but I think that their open leg nudity policy is similar to Model Mayhem's.
Okay, so it's a little bit more than Instagram, but still not very like overtly sexualized. Okay.
Yeah, but also it's harder to get your profile approved as a model or photographer because like they want to only have photographers and models who are like focused on like the artistic side of like figurative fine art and stuff. They do have a variety of different types of like, graphic art and fantasy art and like fine art, and there's glamour and stuff too.
So, okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. But good to know that that's available.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, anyway, like we little bunny trail there, but yeah, social media definitely affects like the way that some photographers that kind of fall into this category work. And that there's the influencer photographer who focuses a lot on getting behind the scenes, maybe like turning the photo shoot into a live stream and like trying to drive traffic to their Instagram, their website, and sometimes this like getting the behind the scenes and creating the TikToks and everything actually like takes precedence over the content itself.
Definitely. And again, that goes back to like why? Like, why
Yeah.
are you doing it? I understand that people like to see behind the scenes. I think it makes the process more understandable for people. I think people like to see the more candid interactions at a shoot because there's just the idea of photos being edited and manipulated is so common now that like people are just holding on to the last little morsel of, oh, well, what really is real? Oh, well, the process behind the photo is real. And,
Yeah.
getting like a peek into that and getting to like see it, and feel that you're really there. So I get why people do it. But then again, like, why? Are you trying to get people to see your Instagram because you are trying to sell a subscription service? Or are you just trying to show that you are legitimate and like you treat models fairly at the photo shoot? Just, again, why? What's the point?
Where there definitely are a handful of photographers that come to mind that I know that do this, that are, that have become successful as a result, or at least it helps support their success and like maintain their presence. Because when you go live on Instagram, your little like, circle at the top of the screen is like it's like glowing so that everybody can see that you're live and you're the first thing that people can see at the top of the screen.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's really intelligent use of resources, right? Like if you have an ability to document something that's happening and apply it to benefit yourself, like good for you. But It's just a matter of like what the photo shoot is, what the purpose of the content is for. Is this like a
Yeah.
personal account and somebody just wants more traction to it? And so they're being like, hey, like, I'm just being candid. I'm doing a shoot. I'm here. Hey, friends, come hang out with me. I'm here. Or is it for, more of a story building for a sales angle?
Right.
Who knows?
And as a model who has, like, worked with people like this, some kind of, like, experiences that I've had just because I've had the same Instagram account for so long, and I have a lot of followers on there. I have worked with photographers who primarily wanted to shoot with me because of having a lot of followers on Instagram, sometimes with the assumption that if they shoot with me, that means that they're gonna get more followers coming over from my account, which in today's age with shadow banning, like, I'm sorry, like, it might give you some exposure, but it's not gonna be nearly as much as you hope it is, you know?
Definitely not. And oh God, this is probably why nobody else wanted to do this topic. So I'll just like flagellate myself publicly here. In my in my days, when I would go through Instagram, right? And I would see professional models, that told me two things. First of all, a girl that I have some confidence in has done the booking process with this person and survived, which is important. And secondly, it lets me know that this person probably has the available budget when necessary. And so it helped me understand like, oh no, this person has never shot with anyone that I know. It's going to be like a hard hill climb to even get this person to understand that I'm doing this for a career and not as a personal hobby. And I don't have time to explain to people why I need to get paid for my services. Like that is a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
So in some way, it could negatively affect you in the fact that girls will know that you are willing to pay. And if girls know each other well and we know each other's rates, we can make assumptions. But again, assumptions are wrong. So, not really the best tactic. But I think now, and people wanting to collaborate with, well known people, sure, you could get some traction and somebody's going to follow you because they took photos of you and they're going to see you. But I think the big difference here is that you you now as the model have the spotlight on you. I don't know exactly when this major shift happened, but with the advent of social media, you are now the thing that people follow. And
Mhm.
so you can like, touch a project with your Midas touch and leave a little speckle of gold on it. And somebody might be interested in that project to see, your face through this person's lens. But it's foolish to assume that just because you work with somebody, it's now going to throw a million and one different clients their way
Yeah.
because your audience wants you. So this person that is hiring you needs to understand that either they're hiring you for credibility, for a specific project that they want to know they're going to be able to achieve.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to be able to say, hey, look, like you can use, her as a reference and this is going to be great for you. And,
Yeah.
I worked with her. She's fantastic.
Yes.
But it's a little delusional to think that they're just going to get flocked by followers because the power has shifted and there's a lot less people wanting to follow male accounts that present various women versus like the woman herself because of her personality and the fantasy and possibly the real ability to have like a connection with her, be it through something as simple as, oh my God, she liked the comment that I wrote on her photo. She saw what I said. I am seen. I am valid. I exist.
Yeah.
But you can't really get that from a male photographer selling photos.
Right, the attention is on the models. It's true, and, like, by saying this on the podcast, I'm sure that there's photographers out there that were thinking about hiring me that are now like, "Psh, I'm not gonna work with her because she said that," so, like, I'm sorry. It's just it's true, like, the way that the algorithm works, like it used to work well where a photographer would like post a photo of me and then they would get a large wave. But because of shadow banning and my account specifically is super shadow banned, I have like a 0.1% engagement rate, which is really bad. If you're an influencer and you're representing brands and you're not showing as much skin as me on your page, you will get a lot more of an engagement rate. And the engagement rate is basically what percentage of your followers are actually engaging and, following the people that you're suggesting they follow. And sadly, my page has bad engagement because I post a lot of skin. So Instagram hates me. If we make a collaborator post together, you will get some followers, but maybe like 5 to 10. That's the reality, and I'm sorry, that's, like, it's not as cool as it looks to have a big account.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I would say people would probably want to work with you because you're an exceptional professional and you're going to deliver exactly what they need of you, right? Like you're dependable, you're talented, you have a media presence. Like it's a privilege to be able to work with you and to gain your time, right?
Thank
Like
you.
you've invested in yourself and you've invested in your brand and you've stayed consistent and you consistently deliver quality products. So
Yeah.
if people want that, then they should hire you.
Oh, you're so
But
sweet.
it's the truth, right?
Aw.
But if they want followers, then they need to have a completely different
Yeah,
understanding of what they're doing on the internet
yeah,
and what their goal is, because
do that.
it's never a bad decision to pay you what you're worth for the work that you do, but that in no way has the obligation to translate to some interest in their work with other people. That's not your job.
Yeah. In summary, with this social media category of photographers, I would say that if you're a photographer out there and you use Instagram a lot that influences your photography, think about what about when Instagram tanks? Like, are you gonna quit photography? I think it's good to have like a multifaceted approach, like different ways to share your photography. Maybe print it out, maybe put it on your own website or just share it other places too, because the amount of times that I've seen somebody's account get taken down and it makes them want to quit, it's saddening.
Yeah. And I actually have two things to say on this topic. First off, I have a friend, Paul. He's worked with you before on a group shoot and he's done beautiful, beautiful art with you.
Hi,
And
Paul.
for, yeah, yeah, he'll listen to this one day. He, for instance, has a Tuesday morning group that he organizes of like minded photographers. And well, not like minded, like intended. They're very different minded, which is actually very important. But they're all there to talk about their art, give each other criticism, positive and negative, to support each other and to really get the benefit of the social aspect of photography, right? That it's not just about talking to the girl in the moment, it's about having to someone share your art with.
Mhm.
And it's small, it's niche, it's not easy, right? What's easy is to just put a photo on Instagram and hope that you're going to like something is going to happen in your life because of it.
Mhm.
But to like seek out these groups where you have community and you have consistency and like you have intellectual capacity to discuss what you're doing, even if it's different. He has one guy that incorporates AI into his art, one guy that does black and white, one guy that does landscapes. It doesn't matter. It's about the fact that they are photographers talking about the art of it, right? And that should be more encouraged and more people should seek out spaces like that, finding groups for themselves.
Yeah.
And then talking about like loss of identity through your social media profile. I mean, you said this about what happens to a photographer. What happens to us as creators? I somehow still have not lost a account to terms of service. That's also because I'm in like a perpetual state of professional hibernation email. But yeah, like people have to ask themselves what's going to happen when everything they've worked for gets deleted. And no
Yeah.
one cares. Meta doesn't care, right?
Right.
Is it going to shake your identity of self? Is that going to make you lose your whole social circle? Is that going to make you feel demotivated to even pursue your passion? And then you have to ask yourself, like, why is a social media platform the reason that you have a hobby? Your hobby should be for you. Your hobby should be for what you want to achieve out of it, right? Like
Mhm.
as a photographer, you get to go to beautiful locations. You get to, create this photo and you create art. Like it's just sad when people forget about all the other benefits to it outside of just, oh, well, I got 12 likes and that's all that matters. Like, mm-mm. It's a
Yep.
very easy way to lose everything and fall into depression and despair. And I would say in some ways it's almost, I wouldn't say it's unavoidable, but it's highly, highly risky in the digital environment we're in now.
Yep. I fully agree with all of that. I think that that's, words to soak on, but I do think it's time to move on to our next category of different types of photographers. How about it? Okay, for this
Either way, otherwise I'll keep talking forever.
so this next category is my personal favorite as of late, the outdoor and location-based photographers. Photographers that primarily like to shoot outside, and the shoots are always some kind of an adventure. For me, lately, it's crawling on rocks and going on hiking trails.
Yeah, I would say these are some of my favorite photographers to work with. Just because for me, modeling has been more than just photos, it's been about the experience. I've been in some of the most breathtaking locations through this job, and I cherish those experiences so, so much. I admire people's desire to work hard for what they create and to, invest in forethought of the project. So, yeah, I think these people are awesome. And I think there's also a very important benefit to incorporating nature and physical outings into this hobby because, like, kind of going back, to our previous conversation, monetizing photography is becoming more and more difficult realistically. But that's not to say the benefits of photography are going away. Like, if you can have this hobby because it motivates you to go in nature, to go on a hike, to find a beautiful location, to return to it, like there is a huge benefit to that, to staying active, to staying socially present with people, to be creative, to physically test yourself, right? Like there's a lot of benefit to going on a hike with some heavy ass gear in tow, right? Like you're going to live a longer, better life if you can achieve that. So
Yeah.
I would say, like, please, like, don't keep shooting in your home. Please, like, push yourself, go out into the world and find something that excites you and bring a model with you and collaborate, like, in reality where life happens and not just in front of a green screen.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so much more fulfillment from that, I think.
And also, in addition to just being outside and that being enjoyable in itself, I usually like this. Like almost everybody that I work with is really cool and nice and a good conversationalist. It's kind of fun to do the car ride on the way to the shoot location, right? Because then you kind of get the awkward, "Hey, how are you? What you doing?" out of the way while you're chatting in the car.
Depends, right?
Is there a story behind that? Depends.
There's literally about 100 stories. I'm going to try to like summarize it into conversation. So, first and foremost, you are a high value professional, correct? Why should anyone expect you to sit in a bumpy car ride for free for an undetermined amount of time?
Right.
That is absurd. So, first and foremost, I think there needs to be a clear understanding that the time a model gives you for the car ride needs to be compensated. Is it
Yeah.
fair to negotiate a different rate than what you're going to be paying her for the different work that she's doing? Yes. She's doing different work. She's sitting in the seat, not doing what she might want to be doing elsewhere, providing a company and discussing the project at hand. That's work. That is emotional work. That is
Right.
brain work, right? Into creative collaboration. There's no guarantee that you aren't going to take a left turn and waste an extra 20 minutes. There's no guarantee you're not going to pop a tire and the rest of the day is going to get shot for you. There's no guarantee the car has snacks or water. Then you're not going to be miserable on the whole ride there back, right?
You guys better have
So first and
snacks, by the way.
Yes, always. Oh my God, snacks everywhere. I have a backpack I specifically got because it has a snack compartment, girl. I always have snacks wherever I go because I've been hungry too many times.
Yeah.
But that's important to understand. And I think some people might find offense to having to pay for that because they're like, well, you're not really working, blah, blah, blah. You are, but in a different capacity. And that needs to be explained that, like,
Right.
you're not just sitting around enjoying yourself. You are present, you are invested, you are focused, and you're not doing something else. So it's not about an ego. It's not about, well, she's just cheating me out of money. I do find it to be inappropriate from the model side to charge, your work rates for the car ride. If somebody does it,
Right.
fine. But I think there needs to be a little give from both angles of willing to negotiate a rate that is more appropriate for that type of work. And for the photographer to understand that it's still work, even though you're behind the wheel.
Right. Also, another way to look at it is, especially if this model is on tour, like say I went to Los Angeles and I'm there for 4 days. I have 4 days to book hourly shoots. If somebody wants to shoot with me for 2 hours, but it's a 3 hour drive out of LA to like some nature location, that's really cool. I love nature. I would love to do that shoot. But if the 6 hours, 3 hours there and 3 hours back, is uncompensated time, like that's time that I could be booking with other photographers who are closer to town. So offering some kind of like not like you said, not a full rate, not your full like 150 or whatever it is per hour, like maybe just $50 an hour for the car ride. That would, at least compensate you for like the lack of ability to book other work during that, 6 hours that you're in the car.
Exactly. And it's not about, a specific number. It's just about the willingness to understand both positions and negotiate, right?
Yeah.
People just need to understand them. Yeah. And I guess to kind of say the other part too, right? While you're in this car ride together, now really the quality of the model that you have with you is going to shine through.
Mhm.
There are who are going to sit there, and even if you have compensated them for this transportation, they're just going to be on their phone, on their Instagram, answering their DMs. That is just who they are, and you have to understand that. And sure, you can try to talk to them, but they are not customer service oriented. There's going to be that care about what you want to do. And they're going to ask you probably leading questions of, well, where are we going? And what's the environment like? And what poses do you have in mind? What equipment do you have? And I'm sure somebody like yourself who has extensive knowledge of the technical element of photography, like this is a great opportunity to talk about that. And then, obviously there's the in between of just having an opportunity to have a more personal conversation and get to know each other before, you get to the work part of it, right? Some
Right.
people want it, some people don't. And again, like it might not seem like, oh, well, is she really working if she's just telling me about her, weekend? Yes, because otherwise I could be at home
Yeah.
sleeping.
Back and smelling my own farts.
Fake farts, sorry, girl. Fetish, shake, fetish, shake. The real ones are too difficult to make happen all the time.
Yeah. So in addition to like the nature shooters, there's also the subgenre of the urbex photographers who like the abandoned buildings. And honestly, like I've been doing this podcast for a while now. Some of the craziest stories have come from abandoned building shoots.
Yeah, I've done a couple, myself, of course. I feel like a certain rite of passage in this community. So, yay and a nay, right? The yay is I get it. I get the appeal. It's beautiful and it's abandoned and it has this like emotional undertone of, dilapidation and distress and power and whatever the fuck you can extrapolate from a burned down, crack house. Doesn't matter. But I get that it's variety and people like it. Cool. What is essential to consider is safety. You know, what are you going to be walking on? Are there going to be needles from the people that squat in this space when you're not out here taking pretty photos?
Right.
If you ask a model to lean on something, like, does she have her tetanus shot? or is she about to have a bad problem on her hands from, getting in contact with something that is going to possibly poke her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get into her bloodstream.
Yep.
Um,
All important.
all these things. Or like, oh my gosh, let's go up these stairs that are barely holding on so you can swing from the rafters on the second story of this, whatever mechanic shop.
Yeah.
Would you like to test these stairs out first, kind sir, before I go like adventuring? And this kind of takes me to the nay of I have experienced an element of carelessness from photographers in them asking me to go somewhere in one of these less than safe spaces. And the way I've seen it justified is, oh, but you're so young and you're so nimble. I'm still a person. I still weigh something. I still can dislodge material and fall and slip and hurt myself, right? So that is just very narrow-minded and inconsiderate
Yeah.
to kind of say, well, you can twirl around and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I would even want to tell somebody like, if you are a parent, right? Or you have someone in your family that is close to you that you really love, would you ask that person to do what you're about to ask this model to do?
That this is
And,
reminding me of a story.
Mhm.
I was at a shoot. It was a workshop, actually, at an abandoned building in Gary, Indiana. And the location was stunning. It was an abandoned church. The ceiling was busted out. There's like, you know, cathedral like ceilings and like vines on the wall. Like I love the aesthetic, okay? But you're right. The care needs to be there. This photographer at the workshop wanted me to be posing amongst the broken glass and then putting my body through the broken windows. And I
Oh,
stepped
broken glass snow angels, my favorite.
yeah, I stepped on broken glass and I was bleeding, you know, it wasn't just a little cut with like a drop or two. I was bleeding. And the workshop organizer did not have a first aid kit.
Mhm.
But fortunately, one of the elderly photographers did, but it was like from the 70s. He had a little glass tube of iodine that he put on my cut with a band-aid and that worked.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah. Yeah, that happens. I would say for me, one of the more like, didn't expect this to hurt when I'm done with this photo shoot thoughts was actually rolling around on train tracks. I never thought that the contact of the wheels to the rail line produces itsy bitsy teeny weeny little bits of metal shavings. And if you get nice and naked and you start rolling yourself around on it and touching it, that stuff gets under your skin like the tiniest little, oh my God, I can't remember the word for it. Little thing, like not a hangnail. What am I thinking of? Splinter, like a tiny little splinter. And I just remember sitting in my car after the shoot and I was like, why is my back and butt so itchy? And then I got home and whoever I was with at the time during my travel took a look at me and was like, you have like these little tiny like strands. It almost looked like, after you like shave a beard with a trimmer and you get like the little nubbins of beard.
Like a
And I
rash.
was just like, but no, like the hair shavings, right? Like off of a beard, like they're just small little
Oh.
bits, right? I had like that in my butt on my back.
Oh my god.
And, it was just itchy. And so, yeah, like I had to like scrub it out and remove it. But never thought that that would be a side effect of hosing on some rail lines. But, there you go.
Wow. So, in summary, for these outdoor and location based archetypes of photographers who shoot with models, like, there's definitely a lot of precautions and like pre communication as far as like the time for the drive and what's expected and the caution involved in like what's touching your skin and like the environment that you're in and the dangers that are there like we said at the
Um,
beginning of this topic, these are our favorite types of shoots is the outdoor adventure ones. But you gotta, respect that we're human and like make sure that we're safe.
Yeah, risk mitigation. And I think also I have personally not been in this issue. I have heard about this happening to others. I don't remember the detail of the situation, but I remember the general problem being that, people would ask a model to do too much. And there's two issues that come of it, right? There's a physical injury or there's a legal problem.
Oh.
Somebody needs to ask themselves, are they prepared to handle both a physical injury or a legal problem? Are you the type of person that's just going to say, oops, and not have a conscience and have this girl pay her own medical bills? Or are you going to step up and offer her some assistance?
Mhm.
And in America, that shit ain't cheap. Also, for the more legal stuff, right? What state are you in? Are you in a national park? Are you in private property? What happens if somebody sees you and issues a citation? Like,
I want to pause a little bit and just provide another disclaimer that, like, yeah, safety is important. Usually, like, when I am just working one-on-one with a photographer, we're working on the assumption, that we're just going to be good humans and handle whatever, if anything happens, like empathetic human beings. I've never been seriously injured. The little cut, the at the abandoned building, that could have turned into something bad, but it didn't. But, like, I personally am not super worried about just like having a one-on-one shoot be something that requires legal documentation unless there is like some kind of a stunt or act, like swimming in the Everglades where there's going to be crocodiles. Like, come on, or like jumping off a cliff and trying to grab a tree branch. Like, that is dangerous, like super dangerous. If you're going to be running events, running like a multi-person event, I do think it's important to have an insurance policy for the event, for sure. And, just like express to everybody that like there could be danger involved and there might be like some kind of a physical like ability requirement as far as like, you know, functioning in the heat, carrying heavy equipment and things like that. So, everything in this episode is to be taken with a grain of salt. I think that it's really, really, really important to keep safety in mind, especially when you're asking somebody to do something particularly dangerous and understanding that if they're not comfortable with the dangerous act, don't make them do it. So a good theme for this entire episode is consent, understanding, and communication. So if you have those things at the forefront, you're good. If you want to do something dangerous, make the precautions, the paperwork, the insurance, whatever, like we're not saying that everybody needs to be like lawyered up for every shoot. We're not saying that, just situationally, common sense.
do they have the capacity to have your safety and your well being in mind? Because if they seem completely self absorbed, say no, go home, book another shoot. But if this person is considerate, they've made not just a gesture verbally towards being caring of you, but also has the paperwork to support it.
Yeah.
Because paperwork means everything when it gets to court and legal issues and medical issues, right? Like, ask yourself, like, as a model, do you have insurance? If you don't have insurance and you're doing all this risky stuff, like, you can end up with crippling debt and no one's going to save you. And nobody's going to be legally bound to save you. Like, is that a risk you want to take?
It's true. These are definitely like the sobering realities of adventure shoes, for sure.
Yay. I love climbing on rocks and trees. It's the best. I mean, it's the best because there's a lot of risk to it. It's the best because it's, exciting and varied and in nature and just beautiful and healthy for you. But like, with
Yes.
a high reward comes a high risk, and you have to have a brain on your shoulders from both ends, photographer and model.
True that. And then, something that we talked about in the episode that we recorded a couple years ago, it was like a year and a half ago or something. Your takeaway, like your rising phoenix moment, was learning how to set boundaries through your modeling. And that definitely comes into play in these nature locations or these urbex abandoned locations. Like, are you uncomfortable with what the photographer is asking you to do? You got to stick up for yourself and present your boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if they want to take you somewhere absolutely insane, write out a document with them explaining what the expectations are, where you're going to go, the understanding that there's going to be risk, and have the photographer say, I am responsible, or my company or whatever the hell this person's, is shooting under, if it's a business or himself. I am responsible for your safety and any medical care that might come of it, and take it to a notary before the shoot. I'm not saying like for every single one, right? That's a little unrealistic. But if something this person wants to do is particularly dangerous and they're willing to discuss it beforehand, like cover your ass. Because I know of a girl that fell off a tree, broke her arm, and nobody was there to help her. And she ended up, losing work for a long time and having pains and, just the suffering that came of it. Little
Yeah.
did she know there's a thing called cast fetish that could have probably paid her a little bit. But again, side tangent. And really just comedic relief to a serious situation.
Yeah. All right. I think we definitely covered that one. Let's move on to the next category of photographers. And this is one that like can be really fun and engaging, or it can be like kind of hectic or stressful as the model. There's a wide range. There's three different subcategories of this that I've collected, as suggestions from my other model friends who are giving me ideas on these different types of photographers. But another disclaimer. So, here is another category of photographers that I would like to rename the category as techie photographers, like photographers who are really, really, really into their gear. A lot of the times, these shoots are very organized because the mind of the photographer also often works like the mind of an engineer, where they're trying to like fit things into each other perfectly. So oftentimes they're very structured, but sometimes when this photographer has not yet honed in on their like craft and like knows how much time each like creative task or whatever might take, it could become like sort of a wild card experience. So with the techies, it's usually a shoot that is, that they have a vision, that they have a technique. Perhaps they're experimenting with something new, but there's almost always like an allotted amount of time for this. But there's with everything, each photographer that is working with experimentation, new lighting skills, there's always going to be like something that comes up the first time that they ever try this new technique. So there needs to be on the model side a little bit of grace, a little bit of patience. And I will say that I have noticed that when photographers are setting up for a shoot like this, especially if it's an experimental shoot, they've got new gear or they've got new techniques that they want to try, that having a model who is patient and that she's not going to be tapping her foot or like trying to like grab her phone and take selfies. Like somebody who could just sit in the moment while the photographer is going through their creative process and not interrupt them unless they like need something from you, like feedback, ideas, or whatever. Like if you need, just play some background music, let them go through their process, and if they need to like crunch numbers in their head with whatever like new technology they got going on, just like let them do it. So some of the like verbiage in these various subcategories of techie photographer, we're kind of describing our gripes with people who have really high expectations for a short time frame of shoot, but I don't want that flavor or that taste to be left in one's mouth that you shouldn't experiment, because we want you to experiment. We want to try new things. For me, when somebody's trying something new or trying a new technique or whatever, like even if it takes more time than the photographer thought, I think that just trying something new and being creative, I mean, that's what being creative is trying something new, right? That's like what I am here for. Like, if you have something going on where you're like, yeah, I want to try something new, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Even if it doesn't work out, like, that's how you hone a craft, that's how you get good is by trying new things. So I love when people have like a techie mind and they've got new gear and they're playing with things because it's always more fun than just doing the tried and true 3-point lighting, like flat lighting, basic stuff. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I love experimentation. I love creativity, but I also want there to be a somewhat realistic expectation for the time frame of the shoot. All right. Sorry about all the disclaimers. The reason I'm doing all these disclaimers is because I don't want photographers listening to this to think that everything that they're doing is wrong. You know what I mean? And when I'm at shoots, in real life, I go to shoots, photographers say that they listen to my podcast and they heard something and it makes them not want to do something. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't the intention of that conversation. Like, me and my co-host are usually just kind of like chewing the fat and like talking about like how things went here and there. We're not saying don't do this, don't do that. These are our like emotional, mental barfing out amongst each other that you get to listen to. So yeah, like keep that in mind. We love y'all. I love experimentation. I love creativity. Throw it at me. Yeah. So, all right. Well, on with this category of techie photographers. One of them is the over-prepared photographers. They might bring 5 cameras, 12 lenses, take an hour to set up. They've got a quantity versus quality mentality. They're going to try everything. They've got all this equipment and, it can be time consuming and it does feel like there's like, a really strong emphasis on like just like making epic content. But sometimes I feel like less is more though. Like, you don't need 12 lenses.
Definitely. And so, first and foremost, this goes back to the situation of sitting in a car with a person on location or going to location, right? Like this type of time needs to be compensated. There's nothing preventing someone from setting up their gear beforehand, especially if they know where they're going to be going and what they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Looking back, I don't like how I've handled a lot of these moments. And I think, again, models should know to speak up if they get on set and they're on time and somebody is fumbling around. And again, I think it's also important to consider the question of why. Why is this person doing this, right? Like, are they technically not very well skilled? And so they're just having like an anxiety attack, right? They're like, oh my God, I have the vision in my head. I haven't practiced enough. I don't know my gear that well. Let me just like go through all of it and just freak out and panic a little bit.
Mhm.
One of those cases is when you have a talented, well, knowledgeable model like yourself. Ask for some help, ask for some advice. Be like, hey, I brought these lenses and I'm just not quite sure what is going to work best for this type of environment. Christy, would you have an opinion? Save yourself the time. Use the talent that you are paying for and your expertise to help guide the process along, right? Like there's no shame in that.
No shame. And I'm glad that you said that because a lot of us full-time professionals that have been doing this for 5, 10, 15 plus years or whatever, like we have, sometimes photography experience ourselves and we can provide like feedback or direction if you want it. But personally, I am not going to offer this unless you ask. If you're hiring me as a model, I am not going to give suggestions unless I'm asked for suggestions because I don't want to step on anybody's creative toes or like throw them off or like potentially offend them.
Exactly, exactly. And this is just kind of goes back to reading the room, right? If the person looks like they know what they're doing, they're just taking forever. As long as you're on the clock and this is their process, whatever.
Yeah.
But if the person is like running around in circles and they're like, okay, they're clearly freaking out, they don't know what to do, they don't have the confidence to ask me, like in my personal approach, this is the moment where I would step up and be like, hey, like, seem to be a little stressed and a little overwhelmed. Like, would you like to maybe narrow down some options or just kind of Can I give you a little direction? I know a lot less technical knowledge about photography than you do. I can remind you to take a lens cap off, and maybe like adjust your focus. But I think people need to remember that like when they work with people like yourself, that skill set is accessible. And yeah, like I think you're right to not impose onto someone's creative process, but it would be wise of the clients to know that there are resources available from you that they would benefit from. And it's not about of ego. It's not about them being not good enough. Like ask for some help
Yeah.
and get what you want out of it.
And when it comes to the quantity versus quality mentality, like the kind of shoots where at the end of the shoot, the photographer says, "Wow, we shot 1,200 photos in 90 minutes. Like, that's amazing. That's more than I've ever shot." I'm like, but are they photos that are accomplishing the vision that you had? Like, because the number, like, I can't come up with any reason why the number of photos that you shot is like the goal of the shoot, you know?
So I think this is like a holdover from the transition from film to digital. I think a
Mm.
lot of the people that we've worked with, they started getting into photography on film and they're like, oh shit, like every shot is money. Every shot is less opportunities to take a different shot. I have to like work through this, or I can just buy 10,000 things of film and money doesn't matter, whatever. And I think a lot of photographers probably went through that transition in their lifetime going into digital cameras. And I think for many people, there's still a bit of like an excitement of like, oh my God, like I got a lot. I got so many. I can't believe it. I love digital cameras. It just gives me this feeling of satiation by quantity. And it's so nice to now to not be held back with, a limited amount of photos on film. Now I can just do as much of it as I want. Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. I think that's where that comes from. And that's
Yeah.
why people are just like, oh my gosh, we got so many. And I think some people see a reflection of that number in the chemistry between themselves and the model. If
Mhm.
you have a model that's just like standing, like asleep standing and, barely has a pulse. And hey,
Or put in the dressing room the whole time.
yeah, or in, the dressing room her whole time texting or whatever, right? You're like, I'm not going to have as many opportunities to take photos of her. So I think people sometimes see that as like a validation of like, oh yeah, like we had really good chemistry and like the modeling itself went really well. Like I had a lot of opportunities to take with this person.
Yeah.
But again, if that gives you fulfillment and joy, fantastic. Like maybe somebody wants to shoot a lot of photos and then go back and really try to find, a candid shot among many. Like I understand that approach. I understand people who, want to do the hair toss 20 times and then pick out just the perfect shot. It's hard to do it right. I understand it takes a lot of effort,
Yeah.
but to think that quantity is going to mean that now somebody wants to see your 1,200 photos.
Yeah. Where are they going?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so also within this like genre of like photographers that are aiming for like being really professional, having really good gear, there's the student who like recently attended a workshop, wants to hire an experienced model and try all the 15 new ideas that they just learned from a workshop, which is definitely a very ambitious way to set up a shoot, but maybe not like the best approach within the 2-hour time frame.
Yeah. I mean, I've had these shoots happen before. For myself, what I see this happen, and it's specifically like a student type, right? Not someone who is just overwhelmed by their own creativity. Like, damn it. Like, I wish I could help. I'm going to be able to like help you create your whole entire senior portfolio in 1 2-hour session. Like, you've gotten yourself in pretty deep,
Yeah.
in your ambitions. And, if I see someone kind of wanting to go through a lot because they have been saving their money, to hire me. And I understand that working with a professional model is a luxury and they have, allocated funds to it. And, maybe they don't make a lot of income and this really is a sizable portion of their budget. Like, I respect that immensely, but it just makes me feel really sad when I see someone just try to do 10,000 things at once and fail at all of them instead of just try to do a few things well.
Right.
And I'm talking to my own self right now and my own ADHD when I say this, because I am known to do this in my personal life for many things, but it's not an effective approach.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
either have to.
Sorry, I was just going to say that there was the suggestion along with this from one of my friends that suggested this category that perhaps if you do have a lot of different techniques that you want to practice with model photography, maybe before you get a professional model into the studio, like you're paying for the studio, you're paying the model's hourly rate, maybe in advance of doing that, just try it out on a mannequin or like your cat.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think people get in this headspace where they hire a model wanting motivation and inspiration, and they're kind of trying to like outsource that to someone by paying them. But if you're a student, you can't outsource it. Like, that's on you. That's what you're learning. So yeah, like, you have to come into this either knowing like, okay, I have practiced this before and this specific setting, my settings are going to be this and my lens is going to be this. And I'm going to go do, set this up. Great. Now we can shoot for 10 minutes here. Now, phase two, we're going to go to this set. If you come at this with a strategy, it is possible. I have seen it done.
Hmm.
But when you kind of show up and you're like, I'm a student, I'm having some, creative block. I don't really know. I need to cover these 10 topics. I'm on a budget. Please help me. It just reminds me of my chemistry tutor trying to prepare me for college entrance exams when I'm just like, I can't remember the periodic table. Help. And she's like, girl, girl,
Yeah.
you are in real deep now. Just don't be that person. Like, learn your periodic table of elements before you pay top dollar for a tutor.
Yeah. 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 I mean, getting some practice in with your gear before like you're working out a lot of money to like put it into action is definitely recommended. But yeah, so that's kind of like the gear oriented like photographers aiming to like stretch their like photography. Like I would definitely say when somebody's working with me in general, like if people that are in these categories of, the so-called over the top professionals or the over prepared or the student or whatever, I still really, really respect and appreciate that their motivations are for creating interesting images at the very least. If they're over prepared or if they have too many ideas and they can't fit it all into the time frame, okay, whatever. It might be a stressful shoot because of the like short time frame with the amount of ideas that you have, but overall, I think it's great that like you're motivated or that you're inspired or that you want to try. Like in the end, like I still find it as a positive thing.
Of course. Of course. I mean, that's like the spark that keeps the art of it alive.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, like outside of the photographers who have like technical aspirations, creative ideas, like bucket list, like concepts or lighting setups, there are also moving into the next category, photographers who have suspicious motivations, and there is kind of a menagerie in this category of different subcategories of suspicious motivation photographers. Number one, the my wife doesn't know photographer.
Can I just do a quick little preface on this just
Yeah.
for myself right now? In my experience as a model, I enjoyed the art of it, but I became personally fascinated by this category of men.
Mm.
I found it very interesting to understand their needs and their desires and how these people expressed that and how they pursued what they wanted to attain. I personally made it my career, my special interest to put myself in situations professionally where I can be a service provider to various intimate needs. I'm personally very passionate about advocating for the sex worker industry and destigmatizing it. And I have transitioned more from an artistic model to a sex worker with a model background. So this topic is really special for me because I understand it, but I also understand that maybe my opinions are different from a different community of models that's more art minded, models that have different goals in their careers and different intentions with how they want to interact with their clients and how invested they want to become in them and how accessible they're willing to be to them. So I just want to let that be clear that like I have chosen to explore this area further because it is interesting to me. And the overall understanding that I got out of the modeling was that, yes, there are all the topics that we just covered now, they exist. But there's a huge scope of men who don't know what outlet to take to have female companionship, where elements of sexuality can be present. And all of these things are a spectrum from a tiny bit of just flirting to full on, full service sex work. And I believe these problems are not only caused by lack of communication, lack of transparency, lack of understanding each other and expectations and nefarious, intent and all the secrecy behind it, but also through legal availabilities for people to get what they want and how there just aren't spaces accessible in many areas where people can find services that take care of their needs. And I think a lot of people in searching for that default to modeling because it's fundamentally a way to get into proximity of a beautiful woman and see where it goes from there. And the fact that people are trying to find their needs to be met by reaching out to models, I understand why do they come to these conclusions, and I understand why they search for, collaboration out of this niche, but it's not fair to models that don't want to be treated like sex workers.
Right.
They don't deserve this. It's like going to a massage and asking for a happy ending from a woman that just wants to give you a Swedish massage. Like, it's not wrong to want a release, but it's wrong to ask the wrong people. But the greater issue is that there's not always a space available where you can go to the right people and make a dignified request and have it be met with safety and dignity for both parties.
Right.
So,
Thanks for your transparency. Your transparency and all that is really important, especially for people listening, because I think that destigmatizing all of this is important while also upholding the standard that like people who are advertising themselves in certain ways may also provide additional services that they can't technically get away with publicly posting about. However, if a model that you're going to work with is going to offer those services, they will tell you. They will let you know. Like you do not have to pressure somebody into something that they haven't advertised to you privately.
yeah. And I'm a firm believer in the fact of, there's no wrong questions. I understand when people want to book a model that they're not sure of what she offers and ask her questions about her availability. Polite questions where the response of no can be accepted and, you know, acted upon is
Yeah.
most important. But photographers need to understand that as soon as you ask the question, my intent, my assumption of what your intent is will change. So if you book me for an art nude shoot, and then at the very end you say, "Psst, do you do blowjobs?" I mean, like, I can answer however I want to answer, but you have to realize that now I'm thinking that you were thinking about a blowjob for the last 2 hours. And now I'm thinking what you're going to want to book me for next time.
Right. Oh my
Right.
god, that literally happened to me recently.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of like taints the potential for future if like the suggestion that the photographer requested is not something that you're comfortable with.
Exactly. And what I see is a sad consequence of this is that this person can be very good as a professional collaborator on set. Then they might ask a question about wanting more. The model feels uncomfortable and doesn't want to offer that. But also now the model is going to want to protect her community and maybe let other models know that this person asks these types of questions. And this is where the big injustice is that I understand the model's desire to protect their community, but I'm frustrated that men who ask questions and are willing to like not push people and pursue them then get stigmatized as predators or less than professionals and unsafe people to work with.
Right. I don't think that that's right. I think that if somebody asks for something in email in advance, that's the right way to go about things. But if they put you on the spot, at the shoot without
They're
advanced
just
communication,
manipulators.
yeah.
Yeah, then they're just trying to manipulate you and now they're like psychological, you know, they're just playing mind games with you and they're trying to leverage their power and your, fear of retaliation. And I mean, those are sociopaths, and that's a whole separate topic too. So, anyways, now that I've done my little preface and we probably have about 2 minutes left, let's fire this off.
Right. We kind of bunny trailed away from the actual like wife part of the my wife doesn't know, going into the, exposing that there are sex workers within the modeling community. I think it's important to address that. And again, thank you for your transparency in that. But the keeping it a secret from your wife that you're doing nude photography, that I understand why photographers end up in that situation, and I do find it a bit sad. And honestly, if you are a photographer that like hires a model and you're at the shoot and you are keeping it a secret from your wife, don't tell the model that. Like, how is that going to contribute to the shoot? Like, come on.
Yeah, because that is a fundamental crack in my safety with you, right? Like, if you're not a safe space for your partner and you lie to her, what can I assume you're going to lie to me about? And I
Right.
distinctly remember this moment at a photo shoot. I mean, this happened multiple times, but I remember this like one time. I'm in the middle of a pose, nice and vulnerable and everything. And then the photographer gets a call and it's his wife. And I just remember the way he looked at me and said, and then he proceeded to talk to her, oh, yeah, baby, I'm stuck at the office, whatever, while I'm like spread eagle in front of him. And I felt so dirty and not even about like feeling that what I'm doing is wrong. I did what I was told to do based on my communication and expectation, right? Like I was hired, I showed up, I'm delivering the product. Like it's not on me. But to
Mhm.
feel implicated in hurting someone, and now I understand that this environment is non consensual and that there's a victim on the other end of this that is being hurt and lied to and wasting her time in a marriage that is built on lies and deceit. Shit, that
It is.
cuts deep.
Yeah, it has tainted my like overall opinion of marriage over the course of time that I have been modeling. Just the amount of photographers that I've worked with who have told me while we're shooting that they're keeping their photography a secret from, and they're like smuggling their gear with all this lighting and all this stuff into a hotel room. And I'm like, how are you keeping all this a secret? Like, do you have a secret storage
Yeah.
unit? Like,
Yeah. And I think a lot of this just comes back to the overall issue that men's needs, especially sexual needs, are something to be ashamed of, right? It's a biological process that women tend to lose interest in intimacy as they get older and their body changes. And men don't go through those type of hormonal and physical changes. And they naturally have more interest in intimacy than women do as a whole. I realize this is so broad. I realize there's exceptions, but I'm just trying to go for like the big picture here, right? And I think it is so fucking sad, honestly, that
it
we
is
live in a
sad.
society that like this the desire to fulfill your needs is so shamed, and that these men have to spin these webs of lies around their wives about what they're doing and why, because they're just trying to have someone make them feel valid as a man who still has needs and fantasies and potentially is having none of that accessible to him in his marriage. There's a lot of conversations that need to be had about, what does it mean to support a partner? What does it mean to be a good partner? Monogamy, non monogamy, rules in a relationship, like this goes on and on and on. But I think for the traditional photographer who, isn't in his 20s, but is maybe somebody who's a little older and was raised on different values that probably got into a marriage with somebody who had different expectations and was in a different time in history where different social norms were acceptable. I understand how these men and their needs get forgotten. And it pains me when they're not only forgotten, but they're shamed for being a man.
It is sad. I would say that I can't offer like a mass key approach to like fix all of this. What I would suggest is marriage counseling. I don't know if that's an option for everybody in this situation, or divorce. I don't think that, like, it is sad, it is stigmatized, but like I think communication, like, and living your true self and like being authentic about who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think that truly leads to happiness.
And difficult conversations, they're just going to be difficult. There's no way around it. If you have a need that's not met and you have a problem, then it's going to be difficult to solve it.
Yeah.
And men need to be brave. They need to talk to their partners and honestly, not assume that they're always going to be misunderstood. I've encouraged certain people to be more open to their partners about their needs. Sometimes it doesn't work. That's just part of it. But sometimes the other person is feeling just as forgotten, just as lonely, or maybe also is wanting to wander and pursue something different. And I
Yeah.
think those are important times to really ask yourself, what is the union between two people about? What is its goal? What is its purpose? What are the commitments to each other? And how can that be adapted as people change and grow and their needs and the world around them changes with time?
True that.
You're not the same person you married when you were, 30 years ago. Your body's different, your mind's different, your environment's different, the world is different.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep adapting and be flexible and be open minded. I think it's important for people to have the freedom to pursue what they need and not be trapped with denial.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Moving on, I do want to get through this list of suspicious motivation photographers. Now, I guess suspicious, that word in itself, now that I think about it, it does have
It's
kind of
kind of like guy with camera, right? You're like,
kind of a derogatory connotation, alternative motivations. So let's get through the list. There's the private client, a photographer who has like unique types of like fetishes that he claims that there's some private client that like wants to order this content from him, but then throughout the course of the shoot it becomes apparent that it's actually him that wants the content. And this has happened to me a couple of times too, where a photographer isn't like being transparent about like what they want and what they're getting out of it, and they're trying to kind of hide it under the guise that somebody else is buying it from them.
I've been in these situations too. They're all different, they're all weird. The conclusion I've come to is that I don't really care what you do with these photos. That's on you. If I feel respected and treated well during the shoot, and you are interacting with me the way I demand to be interacted with and respected, and you're not crossing boundaries, as long as I feel safe, whatever. I I know that some people say, oh, well, don't worry, these photos will be private. This is just for me. Bullshit. I don't trust anyone for anything. If I take a photo, it exists. I have to live with myself knowing that that photo can be on the internet tomorrow and there's no recourse about it. Sure, I can sign some paperwork, blah, blah, blah. This is private, whatever. Privacy does not exist anymore in this day and age. So if I'm being compensated fairly for what I am doing and the type of labor I am doing, the end result to me is less important because of the fluidity of content utilization.
Hmm.
Obviously, if somebody suddenly wants me to interact with them instead of hiring another talent, ooh, that's the big difference. Now, are you wanting me to pose with you, shoot with you, interact with you, and you are getting the experience under the guise of it being content? Or are you hiring two professionals, male, female, female, male, whatever the hell,
Hmm.
for the end product? So I don't really care who's sponsoring it. I don't really care where the money goes. I care where the money goes, preferably in my wallet.
Right.
To me, it's all about like the experience on set and staying in control of the power dynamic of who is providing the service, what the service is, what is the purpose of it, and who's involved in the experience and very importantly, who is getting pleasure.
Yeah.
Because if the photographer is getting pleasure versus utility, this is a session. This is a
Mhm.
different experience. This is a whole different can of worms. If the photographer is getting a product, I don't care who's paying me, just pay me my money and don't murder me, please.
True that. And then there's also photographers who are obsessed with getting magazine credits or maybe even starting their own magazine with the promise that you're going to get published if you shoot with them.
Oh God, it hurts. It physically hurts. I mean, it literally is just like the girl next door wanting to have an OnlyFans and then like buying a house in California with her OnlyFans money a month in. I understand where these people are coming from. I understand that probably in their lifetime, they've gone from film to digital. They probably watched print media, in hand and experienced it. And that was their standard of success. And being published in physical media was a validating outlet for their photography and a way to be distributed and seen and recognized.
Mhm.
I get where it's all coming from, but the world is different. The world is changing. I don't know very many people who care about magazines anymore
True that.
as an art piece, as to say, here, like I've printed these photos, I've immortalized them from, you know, the internet melting and losing all of its content. I don't know, whatever, right? I've immortalized it and it's physical, it's tangible. That is an art piece. People who are making, print art into books, they're creating long lasting time, enduring art that isn't going to depend on a Wi-Fi signal to be appreciated. Beautiful, fantastic. I appreciate it. Keep doing it. It's going to be nice to look at something in the dark ages under candlelight, when the world goes to hell.
Yeah. I would say, like, reflecting on what you just said about having it immortalized in print form or in a book, I do value that, and I think that that's it. It is amazing to have, like, a little shelf somewhere that's dedicated to having magazines that have, like, photos of you or photos that you shot printed out. I think the only time that this comes into, like, a toxic level is when the photographer is using a magazine submission or publication kind of like as a dangling of the carrot to try to get something else out of you. And that's definitely happened to me a lot when I lived in Southern California. Not so much in recent years. I think a lot of people have come to see kind of through the industry, like independent magazine industry, and see it for what it really is because there's legitimate magazines that actually have like advertisers that back them up that pay the people that submit to them, and then there's like independent magazines, and it's just like some guy started it himself and he's using it as a bargaining chip to like get models to also do something else on the side.
Yeah, exactly. And the girls are aware of it. I think for the photographers, it's just a little harder to be aware of it because it means letting go of previous goals and
Yeah.
of a previous like MO of how to do things. I mean, yeah, change is hard, change is scary. I get it. Just be real about what you're doing. If you're doing it for a magazine publication, like understand that that's probably for you. I'm sure the model would enjoy having a copy of it for herself so she can have something to hold. Same way I enjoy taking Polaroids. It's awesome to put them on my fridge. But don't be delused that girls care about being a Playboy centerfold anymore. Like, Playboy's gone. The magazine industry's gone.
The era has passed.
Yeah, the era has passed. It is now a timeless art project instead of a brand development opportunity.
Okay, well, that concludes part one of this extensive deep dive episode of different photographers who like to shoot with models. The second part is going to definitely be the part that is a lot more taboo. So be looking out for that coming up in the next 2 weeks. I would love to hear your feedback. And if you like this kind of episode, you can always reach out to me with questions. If you have my email address or want to shoot me a DM on Instagram, like I'm all about it. So, all right, we will catch you on the next part.